let's make something delicious. For these 1 hour cinnamon rolls, you want to start with 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And on top of this, we have 3 tablespoons of sugar. We have a half a teaspoon of salt. We have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. The reason you have baking powder and yeast is to help it become 1 hour. Then you have 2 1/2 teaspoons of instant yeast. You want instant yeast, not active dry yeast. I use SAF because it's basically foolproof. It's gonna proof every time. It's gonna do right every time. You don't have to proof it first. So everybody gets along with sugar, but salt and yeast can't stand the side of each other. So disguise them by mixing them into the flour. Now you're safe to mix everything together. Because now they can't see each other. They're wearing a disguise. Now we have 1 1/4 cups of milk that you have heated to between 110 and 115. Now I keep my yeast in the freezer, so I always err on the side of 115. To this we are going to add 2 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter that I have let come back to more room temperature. That way it doesn't add heat to the milk, so it doesn't kill the yeast. And also it will bring down the temperature just a little bit of the milk so that we can add 1 large egg. Now you want to have that egg beat up a little bit, and you want to be moving the milk the whole time you're adding it so that it doesn't curdle your egg. And now we are going to add our wet into our dry. Over to the side we have 3/4 of a cup of just in case flour. Just in case you need it. Because you don't know, you gotta let your dough talk to you and tell you what it needs and what it doesn't need. Because it depends on your atmosphere and several other things, even down to the brand of flour that you use, how much liquid your dough is going to take. So you have to listen to it and let it tell you what it needs. And because this is so wet and shaggy right now, I can tell you we're going to need more flour, because you don't want it to be this wet and shaggy. So we are going to dump in about 1/4 of a cup or so of the flour. Now after this 1/4 of a cup, you want to start dumping in less flour than that, because you don't know how much it's going to take. And you want to work that flour in. And as you can tell, it's still pretty sticky. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of flour. And at this point, you want to, after this one, you want to start adding just 1 tablespoon at a time of your just in case flour until your dough is no longer sticking to your fingers like this, and until it has pulled everything away from the bowl and cleaned the bowl, and can still be a little tacky. It can still stick to your fingers just a little bit, but not leave you a dough monster. So now we are going to flick a little flour on our countertop. Now you want to knead this, but you don't want to knead this really hard, because you want this to be a softer dough. You don't want this to be a chewy dough. So you don't want to knead it as hard as you would a bread dough. And you can tell if it's going to need more flour, if it's taking up all the flour that's on your surface and getting sticky again, then it needs more flour. If it doesn't take any, then you know it's a good dough, and you can actually just push the flour out of the way then, and it's not going to stick to your surface. But you just want to knead it probably about a couple of minutes is all you're going to need with this. You don't need a full 10-minute knead or anything like that. And see, it's starting to get a little tacky, but it's not really sticking to your fingers, or not really sticking to your surface that bad. Now if it starts to stick like that just started to stick, bring over a little bit of flour. Okay, now we've got a nice smooth ball, and that's what you're looking for. It's been kneaded for about 2 minutes. Now you want to put this in a bowl to rest. You don't have to rise it this time. Just let it rest in a bowl covered with a towel for about 10 minutes. Now we have to make our filling, because I'm not one of those girlies that just throw on a little bit of sugar and cinnamon and spread on a little bit of butter and call it a day. No, this is a filling for cinnamon rolls. We have 3/4 of a cup of packed light brown sugar. We have 1/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. We have a pinch of salt. We have 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. You can use more or less depending on how much you like your cinnamon. And we're going to mix all of that together. Get that cinnamon all mixed in, that way you don't have any lumps of cinnamon. You're making cinnamon rolls here. You're being sweet to your family and making cinnamon rolls. You're not trying to do the cinnamon challenge, so make sure you don't have any lumps of cinnamon. Now we are going to add in 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter that I've melted and let cool just a tiny bit. And we are going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, roughly measured, of course. Now you're going to mix this all together to form a wet paste. Now you want to start by flouring your surface really nicely because your dough still may be a little tacky. And you want a 13 by 9 baking dish that you've sprayed with cooking spray. Now I use coconut oil spray because it has a tendency to re-solidify in your pan so it doesn't all just run down to the bottom. Now in that 10 minutes you didn't want your dough to rise. You just wanted it to rest from the where you had worked out the gluten so much. You wanted it to rest and relax. That way it will be easier to roll out or pat out here, because you can see that it's such a soft dough that you can almost pat it out. But you want to raise it up often. Make sure that it's not sticking to your surface. And if it starts to stick, flick a little flour under it. Now I am going to use a rolling pin, and you want it to be a rectangle. Doesn't really matter what size it is, to be honest. It matters more how thick your dough is. Now you want to roll it out to between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. And like I said, raise it up. Make sure that you're not stuck at all. Now we are going to start adding this paste on here. Now I find that the best way to pat it on here is with your hands. If you don't like getting your hands messy, you can use a spoon or a spatula or however you like to do it. But the best way to do it is with the tools God gave you. Now you just want to pat it out. You want to leave a little of your top edge up here, because that's your area to seal your dough down. If you lose that, then it won't seal down as well. So you want to make sure that you have as even of a coating as possible. That's why I find that it's easier to use my hands, because I can control where I push it. And when this bakes, it's all going to melt and all seep together, so it doesn't matter as much. But you do want to kind of make it as even as possible, because you don't want to cheat somebody. You don't want somebody to get a cinnamon roll and they're ready to bite into it and all it is dough. Sorry, you just got the roll part. You didn't get any cinnamon, just the roll part. Now you want to take your hands, push down, get it nice and pushed down and flattened. See, now it's nice and flattened. It's not going to raise up and try to roll up on you as much now. Now you're going to start in the middle. Now this part depends on how you want your cinnamon rolls. If you want lots of rolls and big cinnamon rolls but fewer of them, start from the short side and roll this way. You'll get fewer rolls but bigger rolls. If you want more rolls and smaller rolls, then you will start from the long side and roll this way. That's the way I'm going to do. Now you want to start in the middle and start rolling upward. Kind of like a typewriter. If you are too young to know what a typewriter is, go look it up. And you want to work your way over, kind of pulling a little bit so that everything adheres together. You want to kind of pull and roll, pull and roll. And kind of dust the flour off as you go, because you don't want to roll all that flour into your mixture. And you end up with a nice big log by the end. Now when you start getting toward the end, your ends will start to kind of want to cinch in on you. Don't let that happen. Stop them, pull them out. They want to get all shy and shrink back. Don't let them do it. Now, make sure that your edge is clear enough of your cinnamon paste. That way you can seal it. Now, you want to dust off this flour because that flour will keep you from being able to pinch it shut. Just make sure your roll is tight and pinch it shut once your roll is tight. And now, flip it seam side down. Now, your pinch may come a loose just a little bit, but he'll be fine. Now, you want to push in your ends. Now, these ends, some people just cut off the very end and throw it away. I can't bring myself to do that. That's wasting. So I just cut an extra big piece at the end. That way I know I've got some filling in there. Okay, now with this dough, if you roll it from long side, you should get about 12 cinnamon rolls out of it. Now, if you roll it from the short side, you probably will only get 6, but they will be massive. So you want to start in the middle. Now, I'm using a serrated knife. What I mean by serrated knife is one that has the little teeth on it. Because that way you can saw back and forth, because you don't want to push straight down or you're just going to mash everything together. You want to go in a sawing motion. Now I'm going to cut each one of these halves in half again because we want to get 6 out of each. So I'm going to cut each one of these halves in half again. And remember to do a sawing motion, that way you don't mash them flat. Now we're going to cut each one of these into a third. Remember to leave a little extra on the end. That way you have some extra, unless you cut the ends off. If you cut the ends off, I'm not going to judge you. I just can't do it myself. Now I have to show you this middle shot. Look at that. Ain't that gorgeous? Okay, now we're going to start putting our cinnamon rolls. I started with the ends. Just put your cinnamon rolls in your pan. Because now they are actually going to rise. Where 1 hour cinnamon rolls, you don't let the dough rise. But this is where your rise comes in. So you want to make sure they're nice and evenly spaced in your dish. And if they've kind of flattened themselves out a little, you can make them more round at this point with your fingers. You can just kind of push them into a more round shape. But they will rise, and that will kind of even itself out. You want to cover this, put it in a warm place for about 35 to 40 minutes. It can take longer depending on how cool your house is. But basically, you want them to kind of double in size. And during that time, when it's almost time, when you've got about 20 minutes left on the rise, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Now these beauties have doubled in size, and now you just need to pop them into your preheated 350 degree oven until they're no longer doughy. You want to check in between each cinnamon roll. You may want to take a knife and poke in between each one, and also check the centers and make sure that they're no longer doughy. Okay, these gorgeous cinnamon rolls are out of the oven. As you can see, they're nice and golden brown. When you poke the middles, they are kind of springy and they don't just collapse. If they collapse, then they're still doughy. But if they're springy, then you know that your cinnamon roll is done right in the middle. And I've took a knife and kind of poked between them, and I can tell that the dough is no longer doughy, that it's nice and cooked. This took between 25 and 30 minutes. To be oddly specific, it took about 27 minutes. Now, if you chose to roll them the other way and make them larger cinnamon rolls and get fewer of them, or if you chose to cut them in fewer than 12, it's going to take longer to bake. It will take more between 35 and 40 minutes to bake if you've made them much bigger than this. Now, while these are still nice and hot, you want to get your cream cheese frosting made really quick, because you want to get them nice and frosted up while they're still hot, so that it can ooze down in between the cinnamon rolls and ooze down in the middle. So to do this, we have 6 ounces of room temperature softened cream cheese. We have 6 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter. Now you want to cream this together with a mixer really quick. Now it's all nice and smooth and creamy. So now we are going to add 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. Now if you like yours a little sweeter, go a little sweeter. But I like mine a little less sweet. Now I'm going to add just a little pinch of salt. Now if you chose to use salted butter, leave out the salt. Now you're going to mix this on low speed, otherwise you and your kitchen are going to be wearing this powdered sugar. Mix it on low speed until it comes together. Then you will add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract and mix it until it's smooth. See, our frosting is nice and smooth and creamy, and we're ready to take care of these. But first, you want to make sure that you cut between each cinnamon roll. You want to take just a regular butter knife, cut between each one. That way they're easier to get out, and also that way the frosting can seep down in between them. So now, while they're still nice and warm, you want to go ahead and start frosting up your beautiful cinnamon rolls. And you will see that it's starting to melt. You want it to do that. You want it to melt. You want it to ooze down in there. Because the more it does that, the better they're going to be. Now these beauties are all done. And they look absolutely mouth-wateringly delicious. And the whole kitchen smells amazing. My opinion, the whole house probably smells amazing. You want to let them cool just a little bit, because otherwise you're going to burn your mouth really badly, because that cinnamon filling mixture is going to be screaming hot right now. And also the more they set, the more that cream cheese frosting is just going to drizzle down in there and just going to make them absolutely to die for. So just enjoy these with your family, or take them to a neighbor, take them to a church dinner. Anybody that you make these for is going to love you. And remember, come back next time to Angela K's Kitchen, where I take you from gourmet to everyday and everything in between. God bless.
I'm not going to attempt to do this without becoming a mess, but I highly doubt that's actually going to be possible. And you know what? I don't really care. Yeah, I'm a mess. It's delicious. So amazing. These things are, think really can go. So delicious. So tasty. Angela K makes such amazing cinnamon rolls, y'all. You gotta try these out. They're awesome.